here's a question I get asked all the time, and it's usually by first-time buyers. And the question is, I'm buying a house, and can I put my debts into my mortgage? And the answer is usually no, or the answer is no, and I'm going to show you why. So imagine Bob is buying a house, and he has $10,000 in cash, and he has $10,000 in debt. So here's his cash, and here's his debt. And he's buying a house for $200,000. So in Canada, the minimum down payment you need to buy a house is 5%. 5% of $200,000 is exactly $10,000. So he has a choice. He can put $10,000 down on his mortgage, or he can put $10,000 down on his debt, but he can't do both. And if you imagine this is his house, the maximum financing on a purchase he's allowed is 95%, the maximum debt he's allowed to carry in that house. So he can't put $10,000 down here and then put the debt on it, because he'd be back up to 100% financing, and that's impossible. So the confusion, here's where the confusion comes from. So I'm going to show you a different scenario. So imagine this guy, he has the exact same $200,000 house, and he has $10,000 in debt, but his situation differs just slightly. He's actually owned this house for a while, and in his case, he only owes $100,000 on the house because he's owned it, and the value's gone up a little bit, and he's paid it down a bit. So in this scenario, it's called a refinance versus a purchase. And a refinance, the maximum financing legally you're allowed to have is 90%. So he'd be about right here. So he would have 90% financing, and on a $200,000 place, you would be looking at about that's $180,000. So 180 equals 90% of 200. Now in his case, if he added 100, if he added the 100,000 mortgage to that, he would have $110,000. Now, $110,000 is well below the 110 or the 180 as the limit, so he can do it. So when he hears his friend done it, yeah, that's true, but your friend's situation is probably slightly different than yours. So I'll show you one other scenario where someone might have the option to pay off their debts, and I'll show you how this one works. So imagine there's another fellow, so these three guys, three friends, all want to buy the exact same $200,000, they all want to buy the same house that's worth the same amount. He's buying a house for $200,000, and he has some cash, and he also has some debt. And his debt is $10,000, and his cash is $20,000. So now in his case, he has two choices. He can put down $20,000 here and have a $180,000 mortgage, or the other option is he could put down $10,000. So let's imagine this is option 2. He could put down $10,000 and have a $190,000 mortgage, and then he could pay off the debt. So obviously you can't do both though. So he wouldn't actually be putting it into his mortgage. He just would have to pay for it with cash. And there's situations where often it depends on the interest rate of the debt. So if the interest rate on the debt is quite high, then it would make sense to pay off the debt. If the interest rate's really low, then it might make sense to put the money down on the house. And sometimes some things like student loan debt sometimes it can be very inexpensive, and it may make sense to keep it, but it may not. So I hope that clears that up. If you have any questions, you can find me at scott@scottpeckford.ca.